Hey guys, welcome back to Mr. Geopolitics. A quick update. I just put out another video, but I couldn't resist. I have to give you this info right now. Alright, so let's get right into it. As you know, this is the third day of the Kherson counteroffensive by Ukraine. The most success they've had is right here, near this little town or village, or if you actually zoom in, like I've said before, it's actually just a cross street. It's like a junction or a hamlet or whatever you want to call it. But anyways, the most success the Ukrainians have had is they've penetrated through here, this town, Suki Stavok, and then they've made their way east, and then they made their way to the outskirts of the town called Brukinsk. And some people say they took the whole town, which, well, it's not a town, it's an intersection, but whatever, right? Now this is what many sources are saying the Ukrainians were able to achieve. They established a bridgehead, and this is the most success they've had in the Kherson counteroffensive, right? The issue is the T-2207 highway, or I guess if you can call it that, or road, whatever. I guess it's a highway. It extends all the way to all these settlements. All these settlements controlled by Russia right here, right? And if it were to get cut off, some of these settlements have ulterior roads, but they're smaller roads, dirt roads. So that this T-2207 highway or road is very important to the Russians. Hence, what has happened, according to sources, is that the Russians launched a counterattack, and now I'll show you what they've done now. Just give me a second. So, okay. So, basically, okay. Whereas before, I'll just use the lines to show you. Whereas before, they established a bridgehead like this. Something like this, right? Something like this. Now, what they've done, what the Russians done, is they launched a counteroffensive from this direction, from the east, because that road is really important, right, to the Russians. So they launched a counteroffensive. And now, what ended up happening is that the Ukrainians have been pushed back, and some of their forces are still trying to go in that direction, right? Some of their forces are still trying to push in this direction, but they've been pushed out away from the highway. And it seems that the bulk of their forces have made their way south now. Oops, here. And now it looks something like this. So yeah, now it looks, their bridgehead looks something more like that. right? whereas before they controlled this town of Bruskinsk. They've been pushed out by the Russians, and now they're still trying to go back and occupy this highway, but the majority of their forces have now gone south. And I'm going to use another map, a map by Rybar, to show you what this looks like. So initially, this is what they did. You can see how this is in Russian, right? But this is the town of Sukistavok, okay, right? And initially, they made it to the highway. You see the highway, and you see the town of Bruges. I have to keep reading them. Bruskinsk. So initially, this is what they did, right? We'll zoom in. Right, initially this is what the Ukrainians did, and they try to cut off this highway, but the Russians, as you can see with these arrows, they pushed them back, and then the Ukrainians actually made their way southwards to the next town, the next two towns, well, they already controlled this town, so the next town down here is now a gray zone. So this town right here is now a gray zone. The name of that town is Shasliv. So Shasliv is in the gray zone. So anyways, first there was this, then the Russians pushed them right out of the highway. That highway was too vital to them. So this situation looks like it's very tight. I think what the Russians are going to try to do is keep them away from the highway. And whenever you have a bridgehead, you never want a lanky bridgehead. You never, you want a bridgehead like what the Russians did in Popasna. So what the Russians did in Popasna, right? So the Russians initially took Popasna, right? And it was like a bulge like this, right? Took the town, cleared it, and then they expanded in every direction. And some people called it the Popasna flower. And the whole idea is that you want a sturdy bridgehead. You want a solid bridgehead, like something that looks like that, right? You don't want a bridgehead that, for example, let's use this red line as the border. You don't want a bridgehead that goes like this or something, or like something like this, like really lanky, really long, because then that's going to be very vulnerable to being cut off. Your forces, let's say your forces go here, and there's your supply lines. Well, if your supply lines get cut off, right, this X represents the supply lines getting cut off, and these forces here are now cut off from their supplies and surrounded in enemy territory, right? So you always want a bridgehead to be round, bulky, and sturdy, right? Like what the Russians did in Popasna. You don't want a lanky bridgehead. So right now, the Ukrainians are in kind of a little bit of a desperate situation, because the Russians are forcing them almost. First of all, they got them away from the highway, this highway is vital to the Russians. Second, they're forcing them into this lanky bridgehead that's really tight, and if they cut them off right here, well, that's good night, Irene. That's, let's say there's a couple hundred troops here, they're gonna be stuck in the middle of a Russian ocean. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. I thought was important. Another thing is that despite the IAEA making it to the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. The Ukrainians, you see this bomb symbol, shelling near Enerhodar on the way from Zaporizhia to nuclear power plant. So the Ukrainians have shelled the path to the nuclear power plant. And not only that, but now there's tanks on the streets of Enerhodar. There's tanks on the streets. I'll just show you. Where's the tank? Well, yeah, see that there's a tank on the street right there. And here's the video I'll show you. It's short, but you get the point. So there's tanks on the streets, and there's helicopters in the air. And the helicopters are actually engaging a group of Ukrainian saboteurs who actually who were so brazen that they used boats, speedboats, to land here. And I don't know what they tried to do to like sabotage the nuclear plant, or just cause chaos so that the IAEA, the global nuclear watchdog, wouldn't want to go here. I don't know what the point was, but the Russians reacted right away with force, and it seems that the situation is under control now. But yeah, the Ukrainians, they sent a speedboat. And I don't know where exactly, which city from, but they sent a speedboat with a few dozen saboteurs, and the Russians cleared it out. They sent tanks and helicopters, and seems like they took care of business. I don't know if the IAEA inspectors are still going to want to go here. It seems like the Ukrainians. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the Russians are not shelling their own nuclear plant. Anyone with half a brain bigger than a peanut would know that. But the IAEA is supposed to be impartial, is supposed to be neutral. I think it's just a tentacle of the West, an extension of U.S. influence, European influence, heavily influenced by the West. But they're supposed to be an impartial body, and if they come here, I mean, if they're there, there's no denying that they can't play this game anymore and say that they try to imply that the Russians are shelling their own power plant, because they can see it happening. I mean, there's videos of it. I mean, the Russians have advanced radar technology. They can show them exactly where the shells are coming from, and if they're there and they see the shells coming from the north, then there's no denying it. So I don't know what the Ukrainians are thinking, but yeah, they're really not happy about the Russians occupying this nuclear plant, because, as you know, the Russians want to cut off the Ukrainian territory from the nuclear power plant, which probably powers Zaporizhia, the city of Zaporizhia, and maybe the city of Dnipro even, as well as some southern sections. But the Russians want to cut it off from the Ukrainian controlled section, and they want to connect all the electricity from this nuclear power plant to their own power grid, to the power grid of the regions which they control. And all of this, everything that's happening, it's going to come down to September the 11th. Because September the 11th is when the Russians are going to hold all of their referendums. And these are not exactly these are not UN supervised referendums. These are Putin style referendums. And by the way, the Ukrainians have already shelled one of the I don't know if it's still here, but yeah, apparently the Ukrainians shelled a building which was being set up to be used for voting for the referendum. So that could put that's probably just to prevent civilians from taking part, but the Russians are probably going to let people mail in their ballots. They're probably going to let people vote vote online, maybe, who knows. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, they could even disperse the areas where they have voting stations. They could have voting stations in bunkers to protect civilians. But look, at the end of the day, this is a Putin-style referendum. We all know what the result's going to be. It's going to be majority for joining Russia. And as soon as that happens, as soon as all of this territory in red becomes part of Mother Russia, then guess what? Then Putin will have all the excuse in the world, the perfect excuse, to formally declare war on Ukraine. Why does that matter? Because Russia has a military of 1 million men and 2 million reserves. And for political reasons, because Putin thought it would be unpopular to declare war on Ukraine and to get the reserves to fight it, to send the reserves into Ukraine. He thought that would be there might be mass resistance by a lot of reservists and something like that. So because of that concept in his mind, he didn't declare war on Ukraine, so he can't deploy the entire Russian military with all its force. That's why the Russians have only sent somewhere between, initially they sent somewhere between 150 to 200,000 men, which wasn't nearly enough for a 1,400 front line, right? But the Russians weren't expecting the Ukrainians to really fight back. Initially they thought it would be another repeat of Crimea, the way they just stormed their way in, and because not many people know this, but initially the Russians gave the order the Russians gave their troops was to go into Ukraine and to just treat it as if it was friendly territory. So that explains a lot of the initial that also kind of explains why the Russians sustained so many casualties and they lost so much equipment in the first couple days and weeks, because they weren't on a war footing. They weren't on a war stance. They just thought that they had, I guess they had bad intelligence, you could say, as well. But the U.S. had that same intelligence. The U.S. intelligence community thought that the Russians could take Kiev in 72 hours. So anyways, bad intelligence can lead to disasters like what we saw happen to the Americans in Afghanistan recently, last year. So anyways, when that referendum goes through and all these areas become part of Mother Russia, then Putin can say, hey, look. And by the way, a lot of Russian politicians have been urging Putin to just stop playing games and send in the troops, send in the cavalry, send in the whole army. They're like, why are we playing games with these guys? Let's just put an end to this. So it seems like Putin does have some support already for this. A lot of Putin might have actually underestimated the support he has. But anyways, the way it's playing out is that if all these parts in red become part of Russia, then the Ukrainians will not be attacking independent states that Russia is supporting. They won't be attacking separatists. They won't be attacking ethnic Russians that Russia is supporting. They will be attacking Russia proper. The Ukrainians will be bombing and attacking Russia itself. And that will give Putin the perfect excuse to send in, the entire army, or not, but a lot, more than enough, right? Because, I mean, let's say they send in 250,000 to 500,000 men, right? There's rumors, there's reports that they're sending in like 50,000 men soon into Ukraine, equipped with T-90s, T-80s, Iranian drones. And apparently these men have trained for 6 months since March. But I mean, aside from that, if Russia mobilizes and sends in 250,000 or 500,000 men, which they could easily do out of 3 million man pool, then I'm afraid it's game over for Ukraine. They might just want to negotiate. Otherwise, Russia will just do whatever they want. They'll just do it. I don't think anything is going to stop them at that point. If the Russians send in another 250,000 to 500,000 men, well armed or decently armed. Anyways, that's all I got for you today, guys. Thank you for watching this quick update, which turned into a little bit of a longer update. But yeah, thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe, help me grow the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.